Pompeii is a city found in the fertile region of Campania in southern Italy. Vesuvius, with its great size and imposing presence, has an effect not only on the landscape, but also on the culture and the traditions of the population that has always existed under the shadow of one of the most feared volcanoes in the world. The site of Pompeii is a short distance north of the Sarno River and east of the Bay of Naples. This location ensured the city's role as a centre of commerce. It is to its most famous explosion in 79 AD that the Vesuvian territory owes its main tourist attraction, archaeology, with the site of Pompeii, the extraordinary ancient Herculaneum, and the small and fascinating Oplonti at Torre Annunziata. The area of Pompeii has preserved important green areas, but the major attractions for visitors are the archaeological digs of ancient Pompeii, a long stretch of archaeological finds and ancient Roman villas. The vast area of its archaeological site and the extraordinary events of the tragedy that destroyed the city makes Pompeii one of the most important archaeological sites in the world, where the daily life of the Roman civilization appears in all its details. Crystallized in 79 AD, Pompeii was a commercial town benefiting from river trade along the Sarno between the interior and the coast and along the coastal road. It was also the centre of an important wine-producing district, the other main source of its prosperity. Pompeii was an Apician foundation of the 6th century BC, and Dionysius of Halicarnassus maintained that Herculaneum was founded by Hercules on his way back to Greece from Spain. Both underwent several changes of overlord in the centuries that followed: Oscans, Samnites, Greeks, Etruscans, and finally Romans in 89 BC, following the Social War. Excavations have revealed the development of Pompeii in particular. The original settlement to the southwest of the Roman town was fortified by the Samnites in the 4th century BC. These defences were reinforced after the Roman occupation with a new wall and an interior earthen rampart. The early town had a main street crossed by 2 decumani. The Garden of Fugitives is a large space cultivated as a vineyard, which houses the plaster casts of some of the victims from 79 AD, overcome by the fury of the eruption while they were seeking an escape. The director of the Pompeii digs from 1860 to 1875, Giuseppe Fiorelli, introduced the plaster cast method that's still essentially the same one used today. Liquid plaster is poured into the cavity left in the bed of ashes by the gradual decomposition of the victim's body. As the plaster solidifies, it reproduces the body's shape. During the eruption, the Pompeians tried to take shelter in the houses, or hoped to escape by walking on top of the layers of pumice stones constantly being formed, which by this point were more than 2 meters deep. But at dawn, on August the 25th, a violent explosion of toxic gases and burning cinders devastated the city. It infiltrated everything, taking those who were trying to flee by surprise, and making every form of defense vain. Of great importance in Pompeii are the artistic styles represented by their sculptures, their mosaics and their wall paintings. The intensive study of this art over many years has resulted in the production of a typological sequence which is fundamental to the dating of much of the Roman art of the Mediterranean basin. Pompeii is especially renowned for its remarkable series of domestic buildings, set along its well-paved streets. These vary in style from simple dwellings to sumptuous urban villas. With its excavated area extending for approximately 44 hectares and the preserved state of its buildings, due to the particular burial under a blanket of 6 meters of ashen rock caused by the eruption of Vesuvius, Pompeii can be considered the only archaeological site which gives the real image of a Roman city. And the image is similar to cities, not preserved, of the same period. The streets in Pompeii were paved with polygon-shaped pieces of lava. The road was raised slightly in the middle so that any water would run to the edges. The existence of the ruins of Pompeii had been known since the 16th century, but work did not begin to clear them until 1748. Surprisingly sophisticated, Pompeii had a grid layout. It had a 3-stream running water system. One stream went to public fountains, another to public baths, and a third travelled to homes of wealthy residents. Pompeii also offers many examples of shops, storehouses, inns, brothels, and other categories of urban buildings. It's worth noting also that many of the larger houses away from the town centre have excellent gardens, laid out with fruit trees, shrubs and flower beds. The Thermopolium is situated in Via dell'Abbondanza and has the usual L-shaped counter, with a long side facing the entrance. Inside is a white ground band in which the genius of the owner of the shop, flanked by the Lara, is depicted offering libations in favour of the gods. People in ancient times used mill wheels to grind flour, and they stored food in large terracotta jars. To maintain the food at constant temperatures, all but the top of a jar was buried in the ground. In the Pistrinum, the lava mills and the large wood-burning oven identify these premises as a bakery. Each mill consists of 2 millstones, one stationary and one hollow and shaped like a funnel. The funnel-shaped stone had slots, into which wooden levers could be inserted so that the stone could be rotated. Pompeii had outdoor food taverns, where its citizens could enjoy a snack and a cool drink. Shops were clearly marked with carved signs: a goat for the dairy, grapes for the winery, bread for the bakery. The Forum of Pompeii occupies an area which lies at the confluence of important old communication routes. It was the centre of the city when it was first founded, and even after the great expansion of Pompeii, it continued to play a fundamental role in the apolitical, religious and economic life of the city. The main forum measures 142 metres by 38 metres. In the 1st century AD, the forum highlighted the celebratory intention of the imperial house, where the monumental bases for commemorative statues were placed on the south side, in front of the city's administrative buildings, while those of illustrious citizens stood along the porticos. Around the forum, the public administration was present. There were 3 organs of public administration in Pompeii: the Popular Assembly, the Council of Decurions, and 4 administrators. The first monumental arrangement dates from the 2nd century BC, with a few buildings, and the porticos with their double row of tufa columns, replaced with white limestone in the imperial age, when the site was repaved, and buildings added on the east side, where shops had previously stood. The arcade was composed of 2 orders of columns during the Samnite age, that were built out of nocera tuff. These columns were in the Doric style, with the trabeation where the upper columns rested in the Ionic style. The columns on the western and eastern sides are from the Roman period. The Temple of Jupiter is dedicated to the Capitoline triad of Jupiter, Juno and Minerva. It was first built around the middle of the 2nd century BC as part of the enlargement and the new orientation of the Forum. The podium, built in opus incertum, dates to the founding of the temple. The northern side of the Civil Forum is shut off by the mass of the Temple of Jupiter, flanked by 2 honorary arches in brick. This arch is attributed to Tiberius. The Basilica was built in the second half of the 2nd century BC as part of the plan to create monuments throughout the city. It has a rectangular layout with 3 naves, with a ceiling sloping straight down in both directions from the central columns and half columns at the top of the walls, where there are still remains of decorations in the first style. At the back is the tribunal, where the magistrates sat, reached by a wooden staircase. The building was dedicated to administering justice and for business negotiations. The main entrance consists of 5 openings scanted by piers, which lead to an uncovered vestibule. The interior has a nave and 2 aisles. The nave is bordered on its 4 sides by 28 large columns, each built of tiles, which were cut along the flutes and then covered with stucco. A row of Doric half-volumes is set along the aisles. The building already reflects some of the structural conventions later codified by Vesuvius and his architect for the basilicas, but differs in the proportions of the volumes. The Temple of Apollo stands along the western side of the Forum, but doesn't communicate with it. The fact that Corinthian, Attic black figures, and red figure pottery and Etruscan bucero with dedicatory inscriptions have come to light in the area of the temple testify to the existence of the cult of Apollo in Pompeii, undoubtedly imported from Greece via the Greek colony in Campania as early as the first half of the 5th century BC. Various statues were found in front of the columns of the portico. There were several different deities in the temple: Apollo, Diana the Huntress, and possibly Mercury. In the west is the bronze statue of the divine sister of Apollo, Diana. Diana stands with her arms outstretched to hold a bow and arrow. Unlike the statue of Apollo, this figure preserves its original eyes, which are made of bone for the whites and glass paste for the irises and pupils. The statues of Apollo and Faun hunting a deer decorated the entrance to the tablinum, where there's a small painting of Venus. To the Greeks and Romans, Apollo was the god of prophecy, music, and healing. The statue of Apollo, in the pose of an archer, was one of the first large-scale bronzes to be excavated at Pompeii. It was found in fragments in 1817 and 1818, centuries after the city was destroyed by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. The statue of Apollo was made using the lost wax technique, which was widely employed in the ancient Mediterranean to produce large-scale bronze sculptures. The process involved creating a working model in wax and casting it in bronze in separate pieces. The actual temple stands at the centre of a peristyle of 48 columns and is architecturally heterogeneous, for it includes elements appertaining to the Etruscan Italic tradition, such as the podium and the flight of stairs, and Greek, such as the peripteral module and the Corinthian order. Close to the main forum is the older triangular forum, where the two theatres are located. Built in the Hellenistic period, the theatre of Pompeii assimilated all the architectural canons of the Greek theatre, which remained basically the same, despite the various modifications the building was subject to. The cavea was in fact set into the natural slopes of the lava ridge and not raised on masonry substructures. The architect responsible for the renovations and the innovations was Marcus Artorius Primus. He built the annular gallery on which the Summa Cavea rests and installed the tribunalia, or boxes of honour, above the vaults of the covered passageway of two corridors, which led to the orchestra seats. The cavea is subdivided by corridors into ima, media, summa, which are in turn divided vertically into 5 sectors and could accommodate as many as 5,000 spectators. The orchestra is in a horseshoe shape and not semicircular, a fashion which was also of Greek origin and which was to encounter greater favour in the Roman Italic ambience. The specific position of the building can be traced back to the sacral character of the theatre performances, which was strongly felt in the Greek world, and which is here manifested in the fact that it communicated directly with the so-called Doric temple and the ancient sacred area of the triangular forum which it included. A large quadriporticus stands behind the stage of the large theatre and is connected to it, in line with the Vitruvian canon, which provided for a porticoed area in which the spectators could walk and converse during the intervals between shows. The quadriporticus, composed of 74 Doric columns, can be reached from an entrance with 3 Ionic columns set near the north corner. After the earthquake of 62 AD, the complex lost its original function and was turned into barracks for gladiators. A number of items of gladiatorial equipment were found here when the area was excavated. Rooms were built for housing the gladiators and their trainer or lanista. The impressive remains of the town of Pompeii and its associated villas, buried by the eruption of Vesuvius, provide a complete and vivid picture of society and daily life at a specific moment in the past that's without parallel anywhere in the world. Situated near the large theatre is the Odeon, which consists of a theatre cave inserted into a square perimetral wall on which the roof rested. The Odeon was in fact meant for a more intimate type of show, such as musical auditions, poetry recitals and mime, and the seating capacity is about 1,500. Architecturally, there are evident affinities with the neighbouring large theatre, except that here the orchestra is semicircular. The entrances are vaults and support the tribunal. The orchestra was paved in marble in the Augustan period. The lower part of the end walls of the cavea are decorated with kneeling Atlantis figures in tufa. constant variety of invention and originality of designs are united with constant attention to use and structural form. The ornament emphasizes and develops the construction. The House of the Faun represents a house that would have been owned by an aristocratic Roman. The house is famous for a bronze statuette of a dancing faun in the impluvium of the Tuscan atrium. It's this faun that gave the house its name. The impluvium, which was used for collecting rainwater, was decorated, like the tablinum, with coloured marble tiles. The house of Laureus Tibertinus is the house of the priest of Isis. During the sacred holidays, the overflowing of the Nile was reproduced here. The arched loggia, raised above the level of the garden, had a canal running through it. The upper Epirus has a strong significance to the excavated city of Pompeii, because its decorative frescoes are the source of the only known artist's signature, Lucius Pinxit, or painted by Lucius. These frescoes portray the myths of Narcissus on one side of the fountain, and Pyramus and Thisbe on the other. The garden and house of Laureus Tibertinus were joined through the use of an irrigation channel that ran from an open terrace or peristyle through the entire length of the garden. The House of Venus was made famous by the beautiful painting on the south wall, a lush garden filled with flora and fauna, with a low transenna and other decorative elements spread across 3 panels. A centre window gives the illusion of opening onto the sea, where the goddess Venus lies with 2 cherubs in a pink seashell. To the left is a statue of Mars. The peristyle is sumptuously decorated with painted garden features like fountains, hedges, birds, flowers and sculptures. The technique of fresco decoration consisted of painting on a mixed layer of lime and marble dust, which was spread just before starting to paint and thus still wet. 7 preparatory layers could be spread one after the other on the dry wall. This served to smooth away roughness and to isolate the wall from dampness. Damaged by one of the bombs that fell on Pompeii in 1943, and uncovered in 1952, this house seems to be built over an older one, with a larger peristyle and triclinium, a new arrangement of the rooms. Pompeii's Amphitheater was built immediately following its foundation as a military colony by Sulla in 80 BC. It's the earliest of the amphitheatres and is particularly important in providing a picture of this type of typically Roman architecture. It's situated in the southeastern zone of Pompeii. A containing wall with buttresses and blind arches was erected, constituting the principal facade of the complex. Stairways led to an uncovered corridor, which served the Summa Cavea. An inscription tells us that 2 local officials, Quintius Valgus and Marcus Porcius, built the amphitheatre at private expense. These men would have expected this act to enhance their personal power and prestige, and we know from graffiti found throughout the town that gladiatorial games were extremely popular. The Amphitheater was the scene for hunts and gladiatorial games, sponsored by the city's most eminent citizens, who used this munificence as an instrument for personal propaganda. Posters advertising the games and illustrating the program appear frequently on the walls of Pompeii. This kind of show was passionately participated in by the crowds, and various gladiators became highly popular. The arena is elliptical and surrounded by a parapet more than 2 meters high, originally painted with scenes of the hunt and matches. The story of the discovery of Pompeii and its subsequent excavation is a tale spanning over 400 years. Numerous archaeologists have been appointed to uncover its secrets, laid buried with this ancient town for nearly 2,000 years. Pompeii can be considered the only archaeological site which gives the real image of a Roman city.